comes to survival games, Android is honestly in a really good place right now. We've got massive popular titles, hidden indie gems, underrated games almost nobody talks about, and also some truly iconic survival experiences that are absolutely worth checking out. And in this video we're going through all of them, so drop a like, sit back, and let's dive in. Now, for those of you looking for a survival experience that works both offline and online and also runs on basically any phone, let's talk about WHITSTAND. Graphically, the game is very simple with that low poly style design, but honestly that's part of the charm. This is one of those survival games that doesn't hold your hand at all. It throws you into an open world and basically says, good luck. The main focus here is pure survival as you manage resources like hunger, thirst, and even radiation so you don't end up turning into a zombie. And the cool part is that you can play completely offline, join servers with other players online, or even host your own server. The game has PvP, co-op gameplay, and overall it's actually a really fun survival experience. VORAZ Survival is one of those games on this list that absolutely deserves more attention. It's incredibly underrated and unfortunately still has a pretty small player base, and this is another survival game that quickly shifts from an offline experience into a much more online focused one. At the beginning it feels like a classic survival game. Gather wood, collect stone, and build your shelter as fast as possible because there are zombies everywhere. But after a while the offline map starts to feel a bit limited, and that's when the online world becomes the real focus. In the online areas you'll find way more resources to collect, other players to trade with, and of course PvP fights where you can attack other survivors and take their loot. Overall it's a really solid survival game with a much stronger online survival vibe. One of the biggest survival games on mobile has to be this one right here, and honestly it deserves the hype. Let's talk about UNDAWN. The game really exploded near the end of 2024 and got popular mainly because of its open world and the amount of freedom it gives you. There's even a storyline about finding a cure for the zombie virus, but the best part is that most of the time you can just explore the world however you want. The game works almost like an MMO, so you'll constantly run into other players while exploring. Most missions can be done solo, but you can also play co-op if you want. Even though UNDAWN isn't talked about as much anymore, it's still absolutely worth trying. This is the kind of survival game you only find in videos like this, a really hidden one. Let's talk about Unbroken Survival. Surprisingly, this game is fully offline, and one of the coolest parts is that it throws you straight into a completely ruined world where survival is all that matters. Basically, the only things you start with are your dog and a motorcycle that helps you travel around and complete missions. There are also several NPCs to interact with, plus a huge open world filled with loot and places to explore. Since the game is offline, it probably has an actual ending, but honestly I never got that far to find out. If you enjoy survival games with a stronger online focus, this might honestly be one of the best ones on the list. Let's talk about Tomorrow. Tomorrow is impressive in a lot of different ways. Graphically, it's probably one of the best looking games here and definitely one of the closest to a real PC survival experience. At first sight, the gameplay feels like a classic survival game. You collect stone, gather wood, build your base, and try to survive against monsters and wild animals. But the real highlight is the online side of the game. You can jump into PvP battles, team up with other players for co-op missions, fight bosses together, and do a bunch of other activities. Honestly, the whole experience works surprisingly well. TERAVIT is a survival game at its core, but at the same time it also feels a lot like Roblox. Basically, the game lets you create your own worlds however you want and then share them for other players to explore. Because of that, it ended up becoming almost like a mini Roblox with tons of different experiences inside it, but the original base game is actually a survival adventure that feels very similar to Minecraft, just with a much bigger focus on story, character classes, and unique abilities. The open world is easily one of the most interesting parts, especially if you enjoy that Minecraft style exploration, but gameplay wise the game is actually very different. It only really looks similar on the surface. Probably one of the simplest looking games you'll see in this video, but also one of the hardest. Let's talk about Stranded on a Raft. The idea is pretty straightforward and you probably understood it just by looking at the game. It works a lot like Raft, where you survive using nothing but a small raft in the middle of the ocean, just in a much simpler style. But when I say simple, I only mean the graphics, because the game itself is actually pretty brutal. You'll need to gather wood, avoid enemies, and somehow stay alive while managing everything around you. Recently, the game got an update that added co-op multiplayer, and honestly, that was probably the best thing the developers ever did. Even though Portal Knights isn't as popular as it used to be, it still deserves a spot here because it's easily one of the best offline survival games on Android. There's really no other way to describe Portal Knights. At first it feels very similar to Minecraft since you start by gathering resources, crafting and building just like you normally would. But what really makes the game stand out is the RPG side of it. You can choose different character classes, upgrade your gear and travel through portals that take you into dungeons filled with enemies and loot. So even though it's an older game, Portal Knights is still absolutely worth playing if you enjoy survival games on Android. In my opinion, this is easily one of the top 3 most interesting survival games on the Play Store. Let's talk about Once Human. The game is still pretty new, and because of how ambitious it is, you'll need a really strong phone to run it properly. The game throws you into a post-apocalyptic world where you play as a survivor fighting against zombies and all kinds of weird monsters. It also has a strong MMO vibe, so you'll constantly run into other players while exploring the world. You can play missions solo or jump into co-op content with other people, and honestly, the gameplay feels amazing. This is easily one of the premium survival experiences available on the Play Store right now. Of course, I couldn't leave this one out of the list. Let's talk about Mini DayZ. A lot of people don't know this, but the game was removed from the Play Store and stopped getting updates. Even so, you can still download and play it normally through TapTap. One of the best things about it is that it runs on basically any phone since the game originally came out back in 2014. But the real reason it deserves a spot here is because of how unique it feels. I really like its simpler style, and unlike many survival games on this list, it focuses way more on making zombies actually dangerous instead of just throwing thousands of them at you non-stop. LIGHTUS is easily one of the best experiences if you want something that feels like a mix between Minecraft and Palworld. One thing I really like is how much freedom the game gives you right from the start. After creating your character, the game basically throws you into the world with only a few missions guiding you. The main idea is very similar to Palworld. You build your own base, capture different monsters, and put them to work helping you survive and grow stronger. The game also has a pretty strong RPG side, both for your character and for the creatures you collect. And the coolest part is that the world is online, so you'll constantly run into other players while exploring. This was probably one of the first truly massive survival games on mobile, and maybe even the game that inspired a lot of the premium survival titles we see today. Let's talk about Life After. Life After launched back in 2018 and already has over 10 million downloads on the Play Store, which is honestly pretty impressive. The game is still active today with constant updates and a huge player base. The game drops you into a post-apocalyptic world without explaining much at first, and honestly, that's one of the best parts of survival games. There's a ton of content to do, and of course fighting zombies is one of the main focuses. But beyond that, the game also has multiple PvP modes, co-op activities, and a massive world filled with things to explore. Probably the most unique survival game on this entire list. Let's talk about In Next Life. When you start the game, you'll have 2 choices: create your own private world or join a world with other players. And honestly, I highly recommend playing with other people. The game works in a really interesting way. You begin in a small village with a single character who usually starts life as a baby. Every real life minute equals 1 year in the game, and once your character reaches 60 years old, they die. But after dying, you're reborn as a completely different person, usually as the child of another player. The main goal is to keep evolving the village over multiple generations and make sure the civilization survives no matter how many different lives you go through. HUNTERCRAFT is probably one of the simplest games on this list, but one thing you have to respect is how much the game keeps evolving over time. Graphically, it kind of looks like Minecraft, but the gameplay is completely different and way more focused on survival. This is another game that doesn't guide you at all. It throws you into a post-apocalyptic world and basically tells you to survive however you can. There are tons of houses and locations to explore, and from what I remember, the game doesn't really have missions either, which makes the whole experience feel very open. The game originally launched back in 2016, but it still receives updates today. At this point, it's almost a completely different game with way more content and features than before, and yeah, it's actually a pretty heavy game too. I'm I'm not exactly sure what happened with this game, but it never officially released on Android. Still, you can find ports of it around the internet. Let's talk about Green Project. This game actually does a really good job of bringing something different to the survival genre. The story follows a character who spent years orbiting the planet, and when he finally returns, he discovers that Earth has been completely destroyed. Now, the main goal is to restore nature and bring trees back to the planet, which is basically where the game gets its name from. One thing I really like is that you're completely alone. You're literally the last human alive in the entire game, and that's what makes it interesting. At the same time you're trying to survive, you're also rebuilding the planet little by little. If the Play Store is full of isometric survival games today, there's a good chance it all started with FORSTBORN. This is one of those survival games that mixes a lot of RPG elements into the experience. At first, you start in your own private world where the main goal is classic survival stuff like building your shelter and gathering resources, but after that the game opens up into a much larger online world where you can team up with other players, fight bosses, choose your class, and keep upgrading your character over time. Even though the game is relatively old at this point, there are still a lot of people playing it, and honestly it was probably one of the biggest pioneers of this survival style on Android. Earth Revival is easily in my top 3 survival games on Android. This game is honestly incredible and you really need to try it. Just like the other big survival titles, this is a very heavy game, but the open world and graphics are seriously impressive. The big difference compared to games like Once Human or Undawn is that here you're literally on another planet trying to survive and colonize it however you can. There are still some zombies around, but most of the bosses are giant alien creatures, and honestly that changes the whole vibe of the game. Even the world itself feels completely different from other survival games, and that's one of the reasons why I like it so much. And a while ago the game even had a collaboration with Digimon which looked absolutely amazing.
Warning, multiple creatures detected.
This might be one of the hardest games on this entire list. It's fully offline and easily the kind of game you can spend over 100 hours playing. Let's talk about DYSMANTLE. The story follows a character who stayed trapped inside a bunker for years, and when he finally comes outside, the world is already being overrun by zombies. The game doesn't focus heavily on the story though. Most of the experience is about surviving and eventually trying to escape the island you're stuck on. What makes the game so difficult is the gameplay itself. Almost any zombie attack can kill you, so you constantly need to think carefully before moving forward or fighting even 2 zombies at once. Another amazing mechanic is the destruction system. You can literally destroy almost everything in the game, including entire houses and even cars, but if you're patient enough. One of those classic survival games on Android that might feel a bit cliche but still worth checking out. Let's talk about Delivery from the Pain. The story starts with your character waking up right in the middle of a zombie apocalypse and now trying to survive while possibly searching for his family along the way. Unlike some of the more open survival games on this list, this one actually has a proper story to follow along with several quests and objectives. The game is also a bit more challenging when it comes to combat. Instead of throwing huge waves of zombies at you, it focuses more on careful fights where even a small group can be dangerous. Even if the game feels a little generic at times, it's still definitely worth trying. And this is easily one of my favorite types of survival games. Let's talk about Darkest Days. What I like about this game is how it manages to feel simple while also being insanely addictive at the same time. The story starts with you creating your character, and just like many survival games, he wakes up right in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. Now he's searching for his wife and daughter, but during that journey he ends up fighting huge hordes of zombies and teaming up with different NPCs along the way. And trust me, this game probably has some of the biggest zombie swarms on this entire list. But zombies aren't the only problem either. You'll also have to deal with gangs and several other threats while trying to survive. Darkest Days is honestly pretty simple but ridiculously addictive. While you're watching this video, this game literally just launched. Let's talk about Crysis X. Some of you probably played the beta a long time ago, and now the game has finally been released on the Play Store, which honestly caught a lot of people by surprise. From the little I've played so far, I can already say this has the potential to be a top 5 survival game on Android. The game takes a lot of inspiration from DayZ, and it genuinely feels exciting to play. You get a massive open world, tons of zombies to fight, and surprisingly a pretty solid story as well. And of course, the game also includes online features and plenty of PvP action. That said, I still need to spend more time with it since the game literally released today. Crashlands 2 is probably one of the most underrated survival games on the Play Store, but let's talk about it for a second. There's also a first game, but honestly they're pretty similar, so I'd recommend jumping straight into the second one. The idea is that you play as a completely chaotic astronaut who crash lands on a strange alien planet. Now your goal is to survive while trying to repair your ship and figure out how this world even works. And that's what makes the game feel so different from most survival titles. You're not on a normal planet where you instantly recognize trees, food, or resources. Everything is unknown and you constantly need to experiment to understand what's useful and what might kill you. Honestly, that feeling of discovering an entirely alien world is one of the best parts of the game. A completely different kind of survival game that actually takes place in Brazil. Let's talk about ARIDA, Backlands Awakening. You play as a girl named Cicera, and unlike most survival games where resources are everywhere, here everything is extremely scarce. You really need to think carefully before making any decision. Most of the time you'll be helping your family or other NPCs just to earn small rewards and keep surviving. But honestly, one of the best things about the game is how different it feels compared to traditional survival games, that you're constantly trying to figure out how the world works and what you should even be doing next. So if you're tired of the usual survival formula, this one is definitely worth checking out. AMIKIN Village came out right in the middle of the Palworld hype when mobile games were desperately trying to create their own version of that formula. Unlike LIGHTUS, this game is fully isometric and much more focused on management gameplay. Of course, at the beginning you still need to build your house and take care of your character, but later on the game becomes way more about managing all the AMIKIN creatures you collect throughout your journey. And honestly, even though it clearly launched very quickly trying to ride the Palworld wave, the game still ended up being pretty interesting. Let's finish this list with a game that feels like nobody on the Play Store even knows exists, and its name is After That Day. This is an older survival game that works both offline and online. Most of the experience is offline, but if you want, you can invite your friends and play together through LAN co-op. What's really cool is that the game gives you almost no instructions at all. It's one of those survival games that simply throws you into the world and tells you to survive. There actually aren't that many zombies around, but the few you do encounter are dangerous enough to make you think twice before fighting. You can even play cooperatively with up to 5 players, and surprisingly, the game has way more content than you'd expect. And yeah, those were some of the best survival games you can play on Android right now. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which survival game deserves to be on the next list. And of course, we'll see you in the next video.